Hello there, this is Yvonne Teoh Bource on Connect to Soul with your soul wisdom for the week of February the 5th, 2018. And I hope you've had a wonderful week. Now, something's come up this week once again that has given me the inspiration and guidance to use it as a subject for this week's discourse. It's something that's come up over the 30 years that I've been working with people to empower them and for the spiritual teaching. It comes up time and time again. And so I thought, well, now is the time that we address it. And that is, I want to talk to you about the inner child. Now, when I first heard of the inner child, I didn't know what they were talking about, because I thought, well, my childhood was behind me, and thank goodness for that. And I was quite okay, but of course I wasn't okay at all. And what I learned was that the greatest saboteurs that were within me that stopped me from being the person and the beautiful being that I now know to be were the woundedness of the inner child. And that has come up time and time again with my clients. I don't know, just a question to you, but do you find that there are areas in your life where you seem to, no matter how much work you do on yourself, you seem to react to a certain emotion? If there's an outside circumstance or situation that triggers something, an emotion in you, that you can't help but react to it, and it often then takes you right back into a lower vibrational frequency. So I came across that again this week, and I thought, wow, that really reminded me of my own early journey. And of course, for me, my first 12 years were spent in war zones. So I didn't have a very happy environment or a happy childhood. In fact, I did not have a childhood at all until I had my first son. And I had his childhood with me, and I joined in with him like you wouldn't believe. And I haven't given up the inner child since. But I've had to do a lot of work to actually go within and find my inner child wounds and to bring her home so that she no longer has the power to influence my time today. She's very content and she's attended to, and she's no longer afraid of the world. As you can imagine, if you spend your first 12 years in war zones, the outside world doesn't look very safe to you. So I certainly thought that this was a very dangerous world to live in. As for today, I don't feel that at all. I am safe no matter where I go. And that's not because of my inner child or anything else outside of myself or inside of myself. It is because I do really believe that I create my reality. And so why would I create a world around me that isn't safe for me? Anyhow, so talking about the inner child, and what is it? And why has it become such a big thing in this journey, this spiritual journey that we undertake? And why is it that we absolutely must address it? And we must find a way to bring that inner child home safely so it no longer interferes with our life journey, because it does all the time. If you're not living the life that you really want, if there is something in you that is afraid to say what you think, to be honest with the world or even with yourself about the things that really make your heart hum, if you are trapped in this belief that you're not good enough, that you're not beautiful enough, that there's just not enough of you, then that's the inner child. If you believe that if you're looking for approval from others, that is because your inner child is looking for approval from you. So there are so many aspects of our life that is affected by a wounded inner child. So I just wanted to go back and explain that a little more from an energetic perspective, because as you know, that's my field of intrigue, I guess, as knowing how does that affect energy, and how does that energy affect us, and how do we then have to experience it. So what I've learned on this journey of pursuing the inner child is that when we are born, as I have said many times, we do not have any human consciousness. In fact, not any other species of animal does either, because we have to follow our adults to see how they do whatever species we're born into. So as we are born into the human species, we follow the people before us, and whatever those people do, that is how we copy, and we think that's how you do humanness. And this is how we keep repeating other people's mistakes all the time. If we don't pay attention and we don't, decide, hey, that isn't for me, as we grow older, we have then the opportunity to change that. So how that works actually is, so as you come with a clean slate, your subconscious is empty and it's ready to be filled with experiences. And I just hit my mic, which I seem to be doing a bit lately. Maybe I should just keep the hands down here, should I? No, it's just not the way that I communicate. So what happens is that when we've come here with this clean slate and this empty subconscious, we then start to fill it with the experiences that we have. And the way that we do that, we have an experience that creates an emotion. The experience and the emotion are then filed in our subconscious. Now, whatever that feeling and that experience is, they are kind of glued together. And the subconscious believes that one is dependent on the other. And how that affects us later on in life is that every time we have a situation in our life that creates a similar emotion, we will instantly be drawn back through our subconscious to the time, therefore the age, that the original trigger was created. Now, there are emotional triggers that are established in your subconscious, and instantly we become that age emotionally. Now, you've heard so often people saying, oh gosh, that person, look, you're being so childish. Yep, absolutely, because in that moment you are reacting at exactly the same age that the original emotional trigger was established. So let's have a look at that. If, for instance, you had an experience where, let's just take something simple that happens often in our life as a child. Mum's busy, and so she is not within your sight. And all of a sudden, you don't know where she is, you feel lost, and you go, oh, and you have an emotion of fear, of abandonment. Now, the abandonment may be real, or it may not be real. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you have the emotion. So whatever age that you establish that fear of abandonment, of being left alone, in that moment you will create a trigger, a file in your subconscious. Now, anytime later in your life, it doesn't matter whether it's next week, next year, in 70 years, if a similar emotion comes up for you and you suddenly feel left alone, or which is a sense of a lack of safety, of being supported, of feeling protected, whatever that is associated with, you will go back to the original trigger. And if that's at the age of 3 or 4, you can be 75, and instantly you will react to that situation like a 3 or 4-year-old. You will have the same emotions, and because you're now 75, that is not an emotion you like, because it is a powerless emotion. Because at 3 or 4, you have no power over anything. You don't have the knowledge or the ability to have power over your life. So if you're 75 and you suddenly have this great sense of powerlessness, what do you think you do? You react aggressively because you don't like it and you don't want anyone out there to see it or notice it. So very often we will then become very aggressive or push away people who go, what's the matter? Why are you reacting like this? And you go, oh, leave me alone, because you don't understand it and therefore you don't want to explain it. Well, often we can't explain it, yes? So we have many situations like that, and the best way that I can usually explain things is from my own experience. So having spent the first 5 years in occupied Holland with a family that was very involved in the underground, and having black booted SS officers marching into our home several times a day trying to catch my parents out so they could shoot us and whatever else terrible things were going on. I was terrified of the outside world, but most importantly, I had a trigger of people who would stand over me, because being a little child from baby to 5, often I was bullied into, and I must have hidden behind a door and crouched. And I had this original trigger of having a grey uniformed, black booted person standing over me shouting questions, because they were always hoping that the children would, give them truth, and they would catch my parents out. And so all that happened within me, I would just shrivel up and say less and less and less, and just become more and more introverted. Probably difficult for you to think about, but yes, very introverted. And so that was a trigger I had within me. That was one of the biggest wounds, I guess, that child had, except that when I then, after that war was over, we went into a civil war with a lovely gentleman called Sukarno. So we went from Hitler to Sukarno, and Sukarno, he didn't gas my people. He just told people to go out and get the machete and chop white people's and Chinese people's heads off. So it was a much better situation, as you can understand. I am being facetious. But again, what that gave me is this real lack of safety in my life. And so, if you read my story, then you know that I had a change in my life, because someone actually tried to, because I became so terrified of life that I drew to me awful things. And so there was a moment where I changed that, and I became the opposite. So rather than being this withdrawn, terrified child, I became this incredibly aggressive person who, whenever I even had a sense of somebody trying to bully me or bully somebody else, I would fight them, and sometimes literally fight them in the school ground, much to my parents' horror. So a bit of a confused person, I guess. But how that sort of affected me was that whenever I came into a situation where there was an authoritative figure trying to make me do something, I would react in a very aggressive way. And that was not a very good thing for me. And it wasn't until, in my 40s that I met a beautiful gentleman. And if he ever watches this video, hi Pete, who's now become a very good friend of mine. And he did a process on me where he took me back to my childhood, and it was the first time I'd ever met him, and I was introduced to my inner child, and I found out just how wounded that child was, and I then went on a journey to bring that child home, and that took some time, but I did, and it's work that I do with my clients quite often now. So if any of this is resonating with you, and you feel that you have we all have a wounded inner child, because children, want everything when they want it. And if any of that isn't happening, then there's a little bit of a, a trigger in there. They don't have to be big wounds. They can not even be truthful wounds. They can, children hear adults speak and they don't know how to interpret it, so it becomes a wound. So there are all sorts of things that are hidden within us. But what we tend to do is we tend to shut it away and put it back and go, that's over. But it's not over. It's not over until you recognize that you are all of this thing. You're a total package. And until all of the parts of you within your subconscious are at peace, you will always be triggered at some stage to an emotion that that is not of the moment, but that you still have not dealt with, and therefore it interferes. It's a journey that I think everyone needs to take. And when you do take that journey, when you actually bring home the child, and when you become the parent of your inner child, and you give it the love and the attention and the appreciation that it feels it didn't have, and when you deal with the triggers, I remember the very moment that I brought my child home in a meditation. And I went to visit the child in my meditation in the worst time, I guess, of the first part of the war. And I remember grabbing that child by the hand and just dragging her out of there, yelling at the top of my lungs, "There are no," and I swore. And I won't tell you what I said because I'm not a big swearer really. I only have about 3 words I use. But whatever I picked, "There are no so-and-so soldiers in 1996. That's when that took me that long to be able to get that child home. And I dragged her out of there and I went, "This is a safe place. You and I together are now safe." And so from that day forth, I always keep a picture. You probably see if I point there see, there's my inner child. I have a photo of her always by my side. And so I do really encourage you, if you have a wounded inner child, if you feel your parents didn't love you enough, or your teachers didn't appreciate you enough, or your best friend left you, or anything within you that is no longer really feeling comfortable, if you suffer from the feelings of not good enough, it is inner child work. And the first thing that I suggest you do is to ask that emotion, and I ask my client that every time, how old do you feel when you feel this disempowering emotion? And once you get the age, you don't necessarily have to know what happened, but once you know the age of the child, then you can go and search maybe for a photo of the child of that age, get it out, put it in a frame, put it by your bed, and start giving it every day what you think you're missing. Love, appreciation, acknowledgement. My child loves to do things that the adult actually doesn't necessarily, and so I learned to play, and I learned to have ice cream. I learned to have things that the child wanted and I, as an adult, couldn't really be bothered with, but I would actually allow it the freedom of expression. So inner child work is so important. If you don't have inner peace, if you have worked on yourself for a long time, if you have been on this spiritual journey for a long time or a short time, it doesn't matter. But if there is a part of you that you just can't seem to get sorted, I can promise you it'll be inner child work. If you want some help with it, by all means, all the links to my website and to my emails you can find underneath the video here. And please, I do so much personal coaching with the inner child, and I would love to hear from you, because until you learn to bring that child home and put it in your heart where it is forever safe, and it stops interfering with your daily life, you will never find peace, and you will never be able to completely find self-love. You know, I talk a lot about love yourself, but one of the things that I suddenly realized was that it's all very well for me to say that to you, but if you have not come to grips with the wounds of the inner child, loving yourself is almost impossible, because within you there is a child screaming, but love me first. And you know, the sad thing, something that I realized was that particularly if we're parents, so we are hell-bent to get over our childhood because we think our childhood, of course, we have no control. Well, let me have control. You know, when I'm an adult, I have control. Well, we find out maybe not as much as we would like. However, we have more control than we did as children when we had to ask for permission all the time. The thing is, though, that if you then you realize that you're still not really where you want to be. The inner child is in there still wanting that same attention. And you can love yourself all you like, but the minute that you become a parent, and if you haven't addressed your inner child and suddenly you pour all this love into your children, guess how your inner child feels? Because not only is it feeling abandoned in the first place and ignored, its needs aren't being met, and now you have full attention are on other children outside of you. And then you really are in trouble, because A, you don't have time to address to yourself, you're always coming last, and the children are always more important, and this child becomes more and more wounded because you are paying less and less attention to you, and therefore less and less attention to the child. It is a perpetuating wheel of pain. So you have to make a stop. You have to do the work within. You have to pay attention. You know, when I speak to people about the inner child, I often ask people to imagine their child in front of them and feel the amount of love they have for that. And then move that picture aside and move a picture of you in front of you. Do you have the same amount of love for that? And the answer is always no. And that's a tragedy. That causes this emptiness that we feel here sometimes, or the boot, you know, it's an exchange of emptiness or a boot. It just says that your inner child is wounded and you have ignored it, and you need to come home, bring it home, and take care of it as well as you're taking care of your children. It's a biggie, but I really felt that I wanted to address it this week because I've been asked so often, you know, the first thing that people ask for when I do the mentoring or the personal coaching sessions, I always ask, so, you know, what outcome are we looking for working together? And I can tell you the first one is always inner peace. We don't ever have inner peace if our inner child is not at peace. So it is a very big one to address, and it's not easy, and I don't believe you can do it on your own. I couldn't do it on my own, and I know that when I work with my clients and my students, they can't do it on their own because it is so deep-seated, but you can do it. So find a way, and if I can be of help, please contact me. And let's put these inner children where they belong, right out there, being loved every day, feeling safe, feeling nurtured, feeling treasured, as they should be. Well, I do hope that this has given you some insight and some inspiration into just continuing to do the searching within and to heal whatever still needs to be healed. So before I started, I decided I would pick a soul wisdom card, which I usually do because I didn't want to waste any time on the shuffling thing. So the card that I picked was really, really interesting, and I rather love him. Let me see if I can get the glare off. Serapis Bay, and it is Ascension. And what it says is move into your true self, rise above the darkness, the light is here. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. When you bring the child out of the darkness because the light is here. And that is exactly how I felt when I dragged that little girl. I really did drag her. I had about a hand in my meditation. I'm going, let's get the hell out of this place, because where I'm living now, there is beauty and freedom and light, and there is me and you, and together we are free. So when I talk to you about that, the sense of elation that came forth out of that journey was unbelievable. And it was from then on that I was able to actually become the truth of me, the true essence of me, which was pure love. And so I really would like that for you. So this is just a perfect card. Rise above the darkness because the light is here. And the light is who you truly are. And anything that is within you, either emotionally or mentally or even physically, that isn't who you are. You are pure love, pure energy. And so let's make that all of you. Big subject this week. I do hope you have a fabulous week. I intend to, because my weeks don't depend on an external situation. My week depends on me, and I intend it to be a fabulous week. I love you. Thank you for being with me. Just remember that this week I have the Spiritual Book Club tomorrow night. Oh well, yes, because I'm recording this on the 4th. So on the 5th night in Frankston, we have the Spiritual Book Club. And there are still, if you still would like to do the Inspired Manifestation Masterclass, you can certainly let me know. And that is on Wednesday evening in Frankston. And if you would like to do some more work, particularly inner child work, I am only too delighted to be there for you and support you in that. So all the links are down underneath, and I look forward to hearing from you. In the meantime, love yourself more and be all that you can be. Namaste.